continuous thoughts on Austin Meadows, and I saw some comments on Twitter that was just kind of like, all right, we have to cut bait with this guy. Cutting bait with somebody who has mental issues is the last thing you want to do.
A, they have to stick with him just because he's their guy, and B, there's no urgency to cut him loose. I mean, they're going to pay him no matter what, and they must still believe in his talent, and they want to support the individual. So cutting him loose, I mean, it's amazing. The ugly side of Twitter comes out quick. If you scroll through some of the comments, some of the things said about him, brutal. And I know those are probably people with like 8 followers and who are trying to get a reaction, but it does get ugly rather quickly. The one thing I wanted to address real quick, though, on that, I still keep seeing people keep saying, well, Tampa must have known. Okay? I don't believe that. I don't believe it was a damaged goods kind of thing. I know people say that a lot. Austin Meadows would have no need to cover that up. If Detroit wanted to ask him straight out, did Tampa know you were having some issues before this trade? Why would he say yes or no to that? I mean, he wouldn't deny it. So the idea that Tampa was pulling a fast one on Al Avila, I just don't think that holds a lot of water.
I think Austin Meadows needs to get as much help as he can. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the most important thing. I also think the Tigers will cut bait with him at the end of the season. I don't think that they're not going to cut him now. Like you said, there's no point. But he'll be in his final year of arbitration. He'll probably be getting $6-7 million. I mean, they could always work out a deal behind the scenes. You know, and that may be the most likely thing that happens, where they give him, you know, incentive-laden contract of some sort. But I you know, just from a pure sports and business standpoint, you can't keep a guy around if you can't believe that he's going to be there. And it has nothing to do with not supporting him or not caring about him. You're just not going to pay a guy that much money if you don't think he's going to play. And at this point, you know, I don't expect to see him play this year. Maybe later. I was saying in our Discord chat, it feels a little bit like one of those stories, like a Daniel Bard, where maybe he just goes away for a few years and gets things figured out and comes back one day, probably for the Braves, because it's like the hometown team, right? He's from Georgia.
Right.
You know, I don't want to post the book on him entirely, but I'm just, you know, I'm preparing myself for that reality that it's just not going to happen here in Detroit. He's going through a tough time. I do think he had issues in Tampa. I think Tampa knew about it. I think the Tigers knew about it. If there's, you know, when you make a trade, you got medicals. I assume stuff like that comes up in the medical. What I think is the Tigers probably didn't think it would be this serious and debilitating. And it has been, and everybody feels for him. But yeah, I just kind of have prepared myself for a future without Austin Meadows and the Tigers. But there's no telling with anybody you'll see the most seemingly happy, well-adjusted, wealthy, you know, everything in the world, and for whatever reason, it's just not there inside them, and they can't make it work. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Austin Meadows needs. Hopefully, he finds out. But you just can't know. We can't know what's going on in somebody else's head and in their heart.
Yeah, you know, yesterday I saw on a totally different note outside of baseball. I heard someone say the line, "You can't succeed the pain away." And, you know, everything in his life is pretty charmed. You know, he's a professional baseball player. You know, he's had a couple of excellent seasons in the major leagues. You would think, just not knowing anything about him, that his life is pretty good. But all of that success isn't enough to kind of quash whatever's going on with him. And it has to be debilitating. And it is painful to see. And I just thought that was kind of the line that really made a lot of sense to me. All the success in the world doesn't always chase that stuff away.